Keep putting in that work. Keep putting in that work. You know why? You were almost there. You were almost there. It's going to pay off. It's going to pay off. And they don't want you to know that. They don't want to give you that inspiration. They don't want to tell you.
Hi, my lovely people. We are back and we are going to jump back into Sacred Contracts. This will be part 6. We left off talking about the stages of a sacred contract. I'm not going to stay in this section too long because I want to pick up and I want to move on. But before I continue, I want to just touch bases on talking about giving some examples of the sacred contracts that spiritual leaders or, the great masters who came before us had to go through. So it starts off talking about Jesus' contract. The entire life of Jesus can be interpreted as an unfolding in his sacred contract and his continual surrender to it. But let's limit the discussion to 4 of the most important or significant events of his life. So that will be his baptism and enlightenment, his 40-day fast in the desert, his experience in the garden, and his crucifixion, of course. So Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist. The Gospel of Mark itself begins with an account of an event, and at once, as he was coming out of the water, he saw the heavens torn apart, and the Spirit like a dove descending on him. This, the oldest of the 4 gospel traditions, gives the clearest description of a classical enlightenment experience. So it speaks about how Jesus was baptized, and when he came out of the water, he heard a voice saying, "You are my son, the beloved, my favor rests on you." This ritual marks the initiation of Jesus, an act of public revelation of archetypal proportions, representing that Jesus had attained a degree of enlightenment that earned him direct contact with the divine. So this was the first stage of his sacred contract, initiating contact between Jesus and the divine, whom he called Father. The act of a baptism is also an archetypal ritual suggesting the full acceptance of the life one has been given to live. In Jesus' case, the baptism shows the mediation of another spiritual master, and in the person of John, helping Jesus attain enlightenment. After he was baptized, he was recognized as a master and was called throughout the rest of his life. His soul had been anointed and his power awakened. So just the same way as we go through things and we go through an awakening and we go through the 5 stages of our contract, those who came before us did the exact same thing. After Jesus' initiation, he went into the desert for a 40-day fast to deepen the insights and level of his commitment following his enlightenment. I am currently on a fast. Normally my fasts are 40 days, but this one is 36, I believe, 36. But in our spiritual journey, you will have people who will be led to do a fast, and then you'll have people who are instructed to fast. And during that time is when you are able to meditate, you're able to ground more, you're able to hear more, you're able to awaken those powers within you so that you can tap into the divine and get proper guidance and understanding and wisdom and insights at all different levels. So let's see what's next. Even during Jesus' fast, he faced challenges because the devil waited until Jesus was at his physical weakest point from lack of food, then suggested that he use his powers to satisfy his hunger and material desires. Like anytime we're faced with a challenge, there's always that thought or that person or that thing that pops up in our head or comes around, and they're like, all you gotta do is this and take the easy way out. All you gotta do is this and these problems will be washed away. So Jesus, of course, refused all of those worldly goods. This is the difference between being in the matrix and outside of the matrix, being spiritual and being in the physical. You have to know when. You have to use your discernment. You have to use your discernment, and you have to remain the course of whatever path it is that you are on, because when you are living in the world and when you are of the world still, it is very easy to be misled. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Of course, even though Jesus refused all the worldly goods, a profound act in response to his first major spiritual challenge. So just know that we're all going to face challenges. He went through it. We're going to go through it. It's a never-ending thing. Okay, y'all ignore my background because I am amongst the public right now. And, people just do too much sometimes. But that's okay because I'm going to keep recording. Each one of us will encounter such challenges in a form of temptations again and again, and we should not expect them to appear only once in our lives. Just like I just stated, things are going to come. We will be tempted, especially when we are doing something right. That's when temptation comes the most. Either when we are really just steadfast and committed to our path, or when we are at our lowest point. That's when temptations hit the hardest. Every time we enter a new sphere of power, which can include obtaining more money, earning more university degrees, or like with Jesus, attaining a higher level of spiritual insight, we are giving a test. We are given a test to see how we will manage the influx yet another level of earthly power into our lives. So every time we are given something, you will have a test. Before you're given something, you will have a test to see if you have acclimated yourself enough to a certain experience so that you can obtain what is being given to you next. Power as such is not a negative energy, but the question is always, how will we use that energy? So you really have to be grounded. You really have to have knowledge of self. You really have to be mature about how you go about doing things and making the right decision and having the best intention when you are choosing to do whatever it is you are called to do. Because certain people can get power and they can receive all these great things, and next thing you know, they are out of hand, out of control. No humbleness, no humility, they put themselves at a level that's higher than God. They don't need anybody at that point. So that's why we have tests. We have tests to make sure that what we have learned is instilled in us enough to know that the same way we can have stuff given to us, the same way it can be taken from us. And the more we learn how to appreciate things as they are given, and we cherish it, and we go about doing things the right way, the more we will receive. The assignments Jesus carried out were shaped in a part by a need to help the people of that time and place, to heal their psychological anxiety and social anguish, and return them to the practice of love and compassion at the root of the Jewish tradition. Because of the extreme political instability in fulfilling his contract, Jesus would ultimately be led to his death. Yet he accepted all these factors and made the poor and outcast the primary audience for his teachings and healing. So separation and division became a thing because Once upon a time, villagers who may have previously had the responsibility or felt the need to help their neighbors in times of struggle or shortage were no longer under legal obligation to do so. Because at that time, and even to this day, they became debtors themselves. They were hard pressed to provide their own food for their children to eat. Local feuds, which could have been easily resolved, now often erupts into insults, fistfights, family feuds. Land or goods taken as a loan, collateral, that should have been returned to its original owners by the law of the sabbatical year now became the big city creditors' permanent property. So, even with this division going on, Jesus still chose to carry out his assignment. Even though it led to his death, he still chose to make the poor and the outcast the primary audience for his teachings and healings. It also speaks about the Last Supper and how Jesus wanted to go to the garden to pray and asking his disciples to sit with him and feeling anguish and, just really trying to figure out, in a sense, how can he get out of this? How can he renegotiate his contract so that he don't have to die in order to fulfill his purpose? He openly stated in his prayers that he did not want to do what was being requested of him. He was asking simply, like I said, for a way out of his contract so that he wouldn't have to endure the things that he did have to do. However, as we all know, he was not released from completing his life's calling. He surrendered his will to the divine, and he said, "Let thy will be done," without asking why. Having lived a life of love and service, and now having to suffer a death, Jesus accepted that. His prayer was a declaration of supreme trust in the wisdom of the divine, consciously giving up the authority to direct the dynamics of his life. So, while I'm reading this and while I'm going through this, I want you to reflect on moments where we just really don't want to do something, but it is a part of our purpose, because we've all had those moments. And I want you to know that you're not alone. We all have to go through that. We all have been through it. Again, even a great leader, even a great master has had some type of moment of despair where they question, I've done so much good. Why must it end like this? Why must I go through this? Currently, in my current situation right now, I'm right here. I'm right here in this area, in a sense. I've done what I was supposed to do. I'm still doing what I'm supposed to do. But I'm in a moment where unfair things are happening or, going on. And no, it's not fair. And no, I may not always understand it. But that's a part of my purpose. That's a part of my life's calling. That's something that I must go through to get through, to learn, to fulfill my contract. So after he went and he prayed and he surrendered, that wasn't his final act of surrendering, because following that led up to his crucifixion. And we have all heard the saying, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." This statement is central to Christianity and to learning how we should reply when acts of necessity occur in our life that we have agreed to prior to our birth. In Jesus, we encounter a real human who found it necessary to undergo a harsh and seemingly unjust death. Yet he created a model of forgiveness that now stands as an inspiration for all of those who suffer and is underserved. Jesus as a man found it necessary to seek assistance to awaken his country and prepare to live it. So he went through the ritual of baptism as a way of expressing his gratitude for his country. During his last days, he modeled the archetypal ritual of surrendering all that we are to the divine. He showed that we are here to serve divine wisdom as opposed to divine wisdom serving us. So when we are in those desperately painful experiences that we must pass through because of the agreements we have made before our early lives, the practice of forgiveness, though it may seem to our minds it's the only practice that finally soothes our soul, it's unlikely that most of us will ever be asked to make the kind of sacrifices required of Jesus. But many people have experienced life-changing, life-transforming moments of a contact with the divine that has led them to the altar and led them to alter how they think and how they live. Most encounters that we have all heard about are explained to be near-death experiences, which, something happens, the person codes, and they describe seeing the light, and they describe seeing God, seeing the spirit, seeing loved ones, feeling this moment of overwhelming peace, no worries, and then they are told they have to return. It's not their time yet. After that happens, if you really pay attention, majority of those people will come back and say, I got to change my mind. I got to change my life. I got to do what I need to do. I got to fulfill my contract because I want to go back there. I want to experience that again. And whereas before I might have been out here living in the way of the world, doing things that I knew I wouldn't or shouldn't have been doing, now I can fix it. Now I have another chance to do better. The book talks about how, for an example, there's this lady who had a car accident and she had a near-death experience, an out-of-body experience where she met her dad. And the guy that she was with, her dad did not approve of. So when her dad passed, she had this bitterness, this hole, this missing piece of her left because there was no closure before her near-death experience. Once she met her dad while she was out of body, and she talks about how he told her he regret that he never supported her dreams, go and live her life. Once she came out of that near-death experience and she came back and she was back present in this physical world, she was enraptured in just being alive. She felt guided. She felt closer to heaven. She felt like anything she do and everything she did after that moment had to be great importance, had to be a part of her contract. She took responsibility in knowing that truth very seriously. The love and gratitude that she felt toward her father made her appreciate that everything in life has a purpose, even the most painful parts. So after her reconciliation with her dad, it took her some time to find the guy that she was with, and when she did, he resented the fact that her dad pushed them apart. However, they rekindled their relationship. He understood once she explained to him, and from, so on and so forth. there is another example where it's kind of similar to the one I just described, so we don't really have to go over that one. But I said all that to say, before we go into the next contract, which is Muhammad, I said all that to say the divine would not put more on you than you can bear. Your contract will never ask too much of you. You have to be willing. You have to be determined. You have to push through. You have to know that it's not always going to be a beautiful experience. Is it worth it? Yes. Will you learn? Yes. Will it make sense to you in the beginning? Probably not, but by and by. What's the song? By and by. We'll understand it better by and by. The same things we went through is nothing. The stuff we go through is nothing compared to what Jesus went through. But we can use what he went through to help us continue on. Alright, so the next one talks about Muhammad's contract. The West is far more familiar with Jesus and Christianity than with the story of Muhammad and the founding of Islam. Mostly because of political agendas and like centuries of animosity between Muslims and Christians and Jews. But the fact is that Islamic teachings are based on the same moral and ethical principles that lie at the heart of both Judaism and Christianity. So the book speaks about how Allah is the Muslim name for God and is identical with God of the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament in the Quran. Allah refers to his previous interactions with many key figures from Jewish and Christian traditions. Muslims can be as sensitive about interpretations of the life of Muhammad as Christians are about Jesus. Yet, widely accepted accounts of the Prophet's life make no secret of the fact that Muhammad was far more certain about his own mission until well past midlife. So Muhammad spent much of his youth working with the Arabians as far as north as Syria and talking with hermits, monks, and Jewish practitioners who lived in desert caves and remote communities. After Muhammad married, they produced 4 daughters, 2 sons, and for the next 15 years, Muhammad managed an estate and lived an apparently normal, if prosperous, Arab life. By all accounts, Muhammad was upright and moral before he began his mission to the world, but he had not distinguished himself spiritually in any obvious ways. At most, Muhammad might have been considered a Banif. Forgive me if I am not pronouncing that right, but it's one of the desert dwelling who worship exclusively the one creator God whose name Allah in Arabic means the God. It was not unusual for men of Muhammad's desert clan to retreat from society for a time as he did for meditation and prayer. Muhammad began to have what he called true visions in his sleep, like the breaking of light of dawn, and he was drawn to solitude in a cave where he met the angel, and the angel appeared to him, the same angel Gabriel who went to tell Mary that she was having a child. Okay? So, like Abraham and Jesus, Muhammad had to be awakened and prepared in his first stages of awareness so that he could live out the full magnitude of his sacred contract. The early depths of his parents had directed him inward, and once he made that connection to his soul, the transcendent level of his sacred contract could begin to unveil itself. Muhammad then spent more and more time in the caves and worship and meditation, preparing for his mission. The prophet was initially terrified, according to this book, and actually feared that he might have become possessed by a local spirit. For that reason, he fled the cave. When he reached his home, he was frightened. According to, like I said, researching this book, he had asked his wife to cover him in a blanket, and he didn't grasp the full magnitude of his sacred contract until the moment was right and he had attained the necessary strength of his soul. So like Abraham and Jesus, he did not know what would be asked of him, and after the initial revelation, he needed constant encouragement from both human and divine sources. So Muhammad, like a lot of us, we come into contact with these spirits and in the great divide and beyond, and the spiritual world. Some of us are not so accepting of it to begin with. Some of us fear it. Some of us fear the unknown. Some of us wonder, what is this about? I'm scared. We're weary. I'm not going to sit here and lie to you, but before my awakening, I always wanted to know more. But I was always on the fence too, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. I don't know what I'm going to have to do. I don't know what's going to be asked of me. I don't know how much of me I'm going to end up dedicating to this. I don't know if there's a way out once I do it. So similar to Muhammad is similar to our stories for those who can relate. Okay? He needed a lot of encouragement. He needed a lot of reassurance on both aspects, the physical and the spiritual. If you are tapped in, and if you know, you know. When we go through certain things, a lot of times we need encouragement from both sides. Sometimes you will need it more from the spiritual than the physical, because the physical way of the world and people of the world are so negative, are so quick to judge and speak against whatever it is that you are doing that is fulfilling your contract, to the point that if you really pay attention, if you really give into that, you will never succeed. You will never do what it is you are called to do. In those moments, that's when we need the encouragement from our spiritual ancestors, teams, gods, archetypes, God, you name it. That's when we really have to depend on the reassurance from the spiritual realm to know that what we are doing is correct, it's right, we are aligned, and we are walking in our purpose. So God had to remind Muhammad at each step of the way that, he's not alone. Just the same as he aided Abraham, the same as he aided Jesus, he's not alone. The blending of both the physical and the spiritual at that time, that support was a form of charism with which the divine infused Muhammad to help him fulfill his contract. So y'all remember about the charisms, right? If not, go back a few videos, check that out. So when Muhammad began conveying his divinely revealed message to a larger community, he faced great resistance. Think about the hero's journey that I explained a few videos back. When we go off and we learn more and we do things on our own and we gain and obtain knowledge and we come back and we try to share with others, it's not always going to be met with open arms due to the fact of fear, due to the fact of people being people and not wanting to be open, and it's coming from you. Why I couldn't think about that. It's outside of the normal. It's outside of the regular routine. So when Muhammad tried to convey his messages to larger communities, he faced resistance too, just as we do today. The social reforms that he was called to institute angered people. It angered some fellow Arabs who did not want to change the social order that benefited them at the expense of the less fortunate. Muhammad prevailed. He improved life for Arab women by prohibiting female infancy and the prostitution of slave women and establishing rights of women to inherit half share. He did what he could. He did what he was called to do. It wasn't always accepted. He didn't know at first what would be asked of him, but he did it. He made it a part of Muslim law that the followers of Allah must donate a fixed proportion of their income to support the less fortunate, the orphans, the beggars, anyone in a financial bind. Muhammad's contract contained many challenges. It had many challenging assignments. And as he moved from being a successful merchant to raising an army to fight off his enemies, he went through many challenging things. What is most instructive is Muhammad's ongoing alertness to do what it is that he was called to do. He continued to receive messages and inspiration from the divine up until the end of his life. In his last years, he conveyed revelations regarding the nature of the afterlife, the role of Jesus as the great prophet, and our ongoing struggle with the self. After returning from successful battles in Mecca, for instance, Muhammad exclaimed, and he was saying how we have returned from the lesser holy war to the greater holy war. Muhammad could have been talking about the struggle to see things from a higher symbolic or archetypal perspective too, rather than from the physical level. Even as he neared death, he strove to refine his understanding of God's revelation and what it meant to surrender to the divine or the divine will. All of his willingness to surrender to the divine, nowhere do we get the sense that Muhammad knew what his contract held for him from the beginning, or that he could have even continued his mission without periodic guidance along the way. So that's two different stories, actually three if you include Abraham, when we're going through these contracts. And we can compare each three. We can look at and reflect on our own lives and see how we can learn from this. We can use this as a guide to continue on our journey, to continue fulfilling our contract, to continue learning our contract, unveiling our contract, and walking in our purpose. Now, there is, let me see, I think it may be one more to go over before we go to the next chapter. However, I'm going to stop here. We'll pick up on the next video, part 7. On part 7, we'll finish this last example where the stages of the sacred contract is being fulfilled, and then we're going to move on into speaking the archetypes and learning more about them. Again, thank y'all for hanging in there, bearing with me. I'm not at home, so forgive any of the background noises that you hear. I just felt like doing some work really quick, because even though I am in the space that I am in, we must continue. I have a purpose. I have a calling. This is my passion, spirituality as a whole. This is my purpose, to awaken others, to help others, to lead others to awaken and, elevate and become their higher versions of themselves. So, we'll stop here. We'll pick back up on part 6 next time. I hope you guys learned something. Like, share, subscribe, comment. Let me know if you have any questions, if you have any concerns, if you want to know more about something. And I will go back and break it down. I might do another video kind of just reflecting, like a refresher course or something on all of this before we go into the archetypes. I love you guys and have a good night.